The courtroom was unusually quiet that morning. The walls, high and cold, carried the weight of 100 whispered stories, but none felt as heavy as the one about to unfold. Wooden benches groaned under the weight of spectators who had come to watch, some out of curiosity, others out of duty. The smell of polished floors mixed with the faint perfume of papers and ink, a scent that always reminded people that here, destinies were rewritten. At the front sat the judge, stern-faced, robe neatly pressed, eyes scanning the room with quiet authority. He had presided over countless cases, but even he could feel that this one carried something unusual. On one side of the courtroom sat Veronica. Her scarf was tied neatly over her hair, though a few strands had escaped, betraying her trembling hands when she adjusted it. Her skin, dark and glowing under the dim light, was pale with worry today. Her round face carried the exhaustion of sleepless nights, and her tired eyes looked downward at her folded hands. But beside her, like two little pillars of strength, sat her children, Daniel and Daniela. Daniel, the elder by a minute, sat upright, his jaw tight, trying to look older than his 13 years. He clutched his mother's hand under the table, squeezing it every now and then as if to say, "Don't give up." Daniela leaned against Veronica's shoulder, her dark eyes darting around the room, full of nervous energy. She was smaller, gentler, but today something in her gaze hinted at courage simmering quietly, waiting to emerge. Across the room sat Jonathan, their father. His suit was sharp, navy blue with a crisp tie, as though he had dressed not just to win a case, but to put on a show. Confidence oozed from his every gesture, his polished shoes crossed at the ankle, the slight smirk tugging at his lips, the way he leaned back as if the room itself belonged to him. To his left sat Mr. Mike, his lawyer, equally polished, papers neatly stacked in front of him. Mr. Mike's face bore the look of a man already certain of victory. Jonathan's eyes met Veronica's for a fleeting moment. His smirk deepened into something cruel. She quickly looked away, adjusting Daniela's scarf. He chuckled under his breath, whispering something to Mr. Mike, who allowed himself a tight smile. The bailiff's voice cut through the silence. Case of Jonathan versus Veronica, concerning custody of the children, Daniel and Daniela. Every head in the courtroom turned toward the small family. Veronica's chest rose and fell quickly, as though her lungs had shrunk. Daniel gave her hand another squeeze. Daniela whispered softly, almost like a prayer, "Mama, don't cry." The judge adjusted his glasses, his deep voice filling the room. This is a case of great importance. Custody matters are never easy, but this court is bound to seek the truth in the best interest of the children. Jonathan leaned forward, his smirk widening. Veronica lowered her gaze. For a moment, the world seemed tilted in his favor. But then, as the clerk shuffled papers and the first witnesses were prepared, Daniel glanced at his sister. Daniela looked back. Their eyes spoke a language no one else could hear. They remembered everything. The nights of fear, the mornings of hope, their mother's tears, their father's anger. And as Veronica wiped at her cheek, the courtroom faded. The memories surged forward, demanding to be told. It hadn't always been like this. There was a time when laughter filled the little house, when Veronica's smile came easily and Jonathan's voice was soft. But slowly things had changed. The story did not begin in this courtroom. It began in the shadows of their home. The small house on the edge of town never looked as broken from the outside as it felt within. Its cream-colored walls stood tall against the dusty street, its narrow windows framed with rusting iron bars, and its gate always shut, giving an illusion of peace and order. But once the gate closed and Jonathan stepped inside, the peace evaporated like morning dew under the sun. Veronica knew the sound of his footsteps before the door even opened. Heavy, deliberate, and impatient. The kind of steps that carried anger home after a long day. She would always hurry to set the table, her scarf tied tightly, her hands moving fast even as they trembled. Daniel and Daniela, young as they were, had learned to read the weather in their father's walk. On such nights, they tiptoed around the house, whispering instead of speaking, hiding instead of playing. "Why is the soup cold?" Jonathan barked one evening, throwing his briefcase onto the couch. "It's not cold," Veronica replied softly, standing near the table. "I kept it warm. Let me serve you." But before she could finish, Jonathan shoved the plate aside, soup spilling across the table. His voice rose, cutting through the house like a whip. "You expect me to eat this? Do you know how hard I work to put food here? And you, this is the best you can do? Daniela, just 10 at the time, flinched and grabbed her brother's arm. Daniel clenched his teeth, pulling her closer. He wanted to shout, to defend his mother, but one look from Veronica stopped him. Her eyes, tired but pleading, told him what words could not. Stay quiet. Protect your sister. Veronica bent quickly, wiping the mess with the edge of her wrapper, murmuring, I'll fix it, Jonathan. Please, just sit. I'll fix it. Jonathan scoffed, storming into the bedroom and slamming the door. That was the rhythm of their life, storms and silences. When Jonathan was calm, the house could breathe. When he was angry, it suffocated. But through it all, Veronica found ways to hold her children close. At night, after Jonathan had fallen into heavy sleep, she would creep into Twins' room. She tucked Daniela's blanket tight, brushed Daniel's hair back, and whispered prayers over them. One such night, Daniela whispered back, her small voice breaking, Mama, why does Daddy shout at you? Did you do something bad? Veronica froze. Tears stung her eyes, but she forced a smile into her voice. No, my child, I didn't do anything bad. Sometimes people forget how to love properly. Daniel, pretending to sleep, opened his eyes. His young heart hardened at those words. From that night on, the twins began to watch their mother differently. They noticed the lines deepening on her face, the way she hid her tears behind the bathroom door, the way she skipped meals so they could eat more. They noticed, too, how Jonathan never seemed satisfied, no matter how much she gave. One Sunday afternoon, Jonathan erupted again, this time over something small. Veronica had ironed his shirt but left a faint crease on the sleeve. His voice thundered through the house, and in his fury, he knocked a cup off the table. It shattered on the floor. Daniela screamed and covered her ears. Daniel ran forward, instinctively putting himself between Jonathan and his mother. "Stop shouting at her!" he cried. The room froze. Jonathan stared at his son, shock flashing in his eyes before rage took over. He raised his hand as if to strike. Veronica rushed forward, blocking Daniel with her body. "Don't touch him!" she cried. Her voice was loud, louder than Daniel had ever heard it. Jonathan stopped, hand trembling in the air, then let it drop with a scoff. "You're raising him against me," he spat. "Ungrateful woman." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Veronica sank to her knees, pulling both children close. Her tears spilled freely onto their heads. "My babies," she whispered, "don't ever think this is your fault. You are my joy. You are the only reason I'm still standing." Daniel held her tightly. Daniela wept quietly against her chest. It was in moments like these that the twins made a silent promise to each other. One day, they would protect their mother. One day, they would make sure she no longer had to cry behind closed doors. That day came sooner than they expected. Jonathan's temper grew worse over the years. He began threatening Veronica openly. "If you ever think of leaving me, I'll take the children. You'll have nothing." Veronica lived under that shadow for too long, until the night Jonathan grabbed her by the arm during an argument, his fingers digging into her skin. The pain and humiliation in her eyes that night lit a fire in Daniel and Daniela's hearts. Later, after Jonathan had gone to sleep, Daniel whispered in the dark, "We can't let him do this anymore. We have to help Mama." Daniela nodded, her small fists clenched. "We'll stand for her, even if he's our father." That was the night the twins decided they would fight for Veronica, no matter what it cost. The night that changed everything began like many others, thick with silence, broken only by Jonathan's angry muttering in the living room. He had returned home late, his tie loosened, his steps unsteady with alcohol. Veronica stayed in the kitchen, praying he would not call her name. But he did. "Veronica!" Her heart skipped. She wiped her hands on her wrapper and stepped into the living room. "Yes, Jonathan." He turned to face her, his eyes sharp and cold. "Do you think you're a good wife? Tell me. Do you?" She opened her mouth, but no words came. She knew anything she said would be twisted into another reason for him to rage. "You're useless," Jonathan spat, slamming his glass onto the table. "You think cooking and cleaning is enough? Look at you. Always tired, always pitiful. If it wasn't for me, you'd be nothing." Veronica flinched. She looked at the floor, swallowing the tears threatening to fall. In the hallway, Daniel and Daniela watched, their small bodies pressed against the wall, their ears wide open. They knew these scenes too well. Jonathan leaned closer to Veronica, his voice dropping to a threat. "And don't think you can run. If you try, I'll take the children. Do you hear me? I'll make sure you never see them again." Something inside Veronica broke that night. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a quiet snapping of a spirit that had been stretched too long. She turned and walked away, not daring to respond. In her room, behind closed doors, she sat on the bed and buried her face in her hands. Minutes later, Daniel and Daniela crept in. "Mama," Daniela whispered, climbing onto the bed beside her, "please don't cry." Veronica shook her head, forcing a weak smile. "I'm fine, my daughter. Go and sleep." But Daniel, his face hard, stood at the foot of the bed. "No, Mama, you're not fine. He hurts you, he scares us. We can't keep living like this." His voice was firm, older than his years. Veronica stared at him, stunned by the fire in his eyes. "What can we do, my son?" she whispered. "He is your father." Daniel stepped closer, his fist clenched. "Then let the world know what kind of father he really is. Let them know what kind of man he is. We'll tell the truth, Mama. In court." The room went silent. Veronica's heart pounded. The thought terrified her, but it also brought a flicker of hope. Daniela lifted her chin. "Mama, we'll stand with you. We're not afraid." Tears filled Veronica's eyes, but these were different. Tears not of weakness, but of awakening. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of her suffering begin to shift. That week, Veronica sought advice from a neighbor who had once faced a similar battle. She was told she could file for custody, that the court would listen if there was evidence Jonathan was unfit. Her hands trembled as she filled out the papers, but she did it. For Daniel, for Daniela, for herself. When Jonathan received the court summons, his laughter filled the house. "You? Taking me to court?" He waved the papers in her face. "You think you'll win against me?" He laughed again, louder, crueler. "I'll crush you, Veronica. I'll show you what a mistake this is." Within days, Jonathan hired Mr. Mike, a lawyer known for his sharp tongue and ruthless strategies. Mr. Mike visited the house once, sitting in the living room with his files neatly spread. "Mr. Jonathan," he said, his voice smooth and confident, "don't worry. Custody cases depend on credibility. We'll paint you as a hard-working father, a victim of an ungrateful wife. Judges believe what they see, not what they don't. Leave everything to me." Jonathan grinned, leaning back in his chair. She won't stand a chance. In her room, Veronica overheard every word. Her heart sank. She wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't strong like Jonathan. How could she face him and his polished advocate? But when she turned to see Daniel and Daniela standing behind her, determination burning in their young faces, she knew she could not retreat. "Mama," Daniel whispered, "you won't be alone. We'll tell them everything. We'll tell the truth." Veronica knelt, pulling her children into her arms. She breathed them in, their warmth, their courage, their love. "No matter what happens," she whispered, "you are my strength, and I will fight for you." The days leading to the trial were a blur of paperwork, whispered prayers, and sleepless nights. Neighbors whispered, relatives called, but Veronica kept her focus. When the court date finally arrived, the morning air felt heavy with fate. Veronica wrapped her scarf tightly, her hands trembling as she held her children close. At the courthouse, Jonathan strutted in with Mr. Mike, his confidence like a storm cloud filling the room. Veronica entered quietly, but with Daniel and Daniela at her side, she carried a quiet strength. The case was about to begin. And though Jonathan believed victory was already his, the twins carried a truth that would soon tear through his illusions. The benches creaked as people leaned forward, curious to witness the drama between husband and wife. At the front, the judge adjusted his glasses and signaled for the proceedings to begin. Jonathan rose from his seat, straightening his tie. His confidence was palpable, a performance polished by years of pretending. He walked to the stand with the swagger of a man who believed the law itself bent in his favor. Mr. Mike followed closely, papers neatly stacked, his polished shoes clicking on the floor. He placed his files on the desk, nodded to the judge, and began his opening statement. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, his voice carrying the assurance of practiced skill, "we are here to protect the well-being of 2 children. My client, Jonathan, is a hard-working father, devoted to his family. He has provided food, shelter, and education, while his wife, unfortunately, has been unstable, neglectful, and incapable of maintaining a proper home environment." The words struck Veronica like blows. She gasped softly, her hands tightening around Daniela's fingers. Daniel clenched his jaw, glaring at Mr. Mike with more fire than his years allowed. Mr. Mike continued, his voice steady and commanding. Jonathan has suffered greatly at the hands of a woman who does not appreciate his sacrifices. He seeks not vengeance, but fairness. He simply wants custody of his children so that they can grow in a stable, disciplined, and secure environment. Jonathan nodded solemnly, as if every word was the gospel truth. The spectators murmured, some shaking their heads in pity for him. Veronica lowered her eyes, shame burning her cheeks. Then came Jonathan's testimony. He stepped up, resting one hand dramatically on the stand. Your Honor, he began, his voice thick with false sincerity, I have always loved my family. I work long hours, sometimes late into the night, to provide for them. But instead of gratitude, I come home to complaints. My wife, she is always tired, always unhappy, always unwilling to fulfill her duties as a wife and mother. His voice cracked, and he paused, dabbing at imaginary tears with a folded handkerchief. The performance was flawless. There were times, he continued, when I returned home to no food prepared, when my clothes were left wrinkled, when my children were left to themselves. I stepped in, I did my best. But what can one man do when his own wife refuses to stand by him? Veronica's lips parted in shock. Wrinkled clothes? No food? Her body shook with the weight of the lies. She wanted to scream, to stand up and shout the truth, but her lawyer squeezed her arm gently, urging patience. Mr. Mike seized the moment, pacing before the judge. You see, Your Honor, this is not just a matter of custody. This is a matter of the children's future. My client has endured humiliation, neglect, and emotional distress. Yet, he is still willing to care for his children, to raise them with discipline and love. The judge scribbled notes, his face unreadable. Jonathan returned to his seat, his lips curling into that same familiar smirk. He leaned toward Veronica, whispering just loud enough for her to hear, You're finished. Her heart sank. She looked at Daniel and Daniela. Daniela's eyes brimmed with tears, but Daniel's stare was steady, burning, unyielding. Next, Veronica was called to the stand. She rose slowly, her scarf slipping slightly as she walked to the front. Her hands trembled as she took the oath. When asked to speak, her voice was soft, almost fragile. I have done my best, she whispered. I have loved my children. I have cared for them with everything in me. Yes, I get tired. Yes, I may not be perfect, but Her voice faltered. The courtroom blurred through her tears. She could feel Jonathan's eyes drilling into her, mocking her weakness. Mr. Mike pounced. Mrs. Veronica, is it true that there were nights when your husband returned to find no food prepared? She swallowed. There were nights when I kept the food warm, but he came so late. So you admit it, Mr. Mike cut her off, turning to the judge. She neglected her duties. And is it true, Mr. Mike pressed on, that your children sometimes lack basic discipline in your home? Veronica's lips trembled. No, Answer yes or no, Mr. Mike snapped. The judge raised a hand. Counsel, allow her to finish. But the damage was done. Veronica's words stumbled, her voice breaking. By the time she returned to her seat, she felt crushed. Jonathan sat tall, his smirk now a wide grin. Mr. Mike whispered something to him, and both men chuckled softly. Daniel gripped his mother's hand tightly. Mama, he whispered fiercely, don't be afraid. We know the truth. We'll speak. Veronica looked at her children, her tears spilling freely now. Her heart broke at the thought of them being dragged into this, but she could see it in their faces. They were ready. And though Jonathan sat smugly in his chair, certain he had already won, a storm was gathering quietly in the small, determined hearts of Daniel and Daniela. They were not done. Not yet. The judge's gavel struck once, steadying the restless murmurs that had filled the room after Veronica's faltering testimony. He leaned forward, scanning the courtroom with a sharp gaze. Order, he said firmly. Now, before I proceed further, I would like to hear directly from the children. Their welfare is at the heart of this case. Bailiff, please call Daniel and Daniela to the stand. Gasps rippled through the room. Jonathan stiffened in his chair, his smirk faltering. Mr. Mike leaned toward him, whispering urgently, but Jonathan's eyes were fixed on the twins as they rose slowly to their feet. Daniel went first, his small hand tightening around his sister's, as if he were her shield. His chin was high, his eyes steady, so unlike a boy his age. He placed one hand on the Bible and took the oath with a clear voice that surprised even the judge. Then he climbed onto the witness seat, his feet dangling inches above the ground. The judge leaned forward. Daniel, do you understand why you are here? Yes, my lord, Daniel said, his voice steady. I am here to tell the truth about what happens in our house. Jonathan shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his collar. Go on, the judge encouraged. Daniel took a deep breath. My mother. She is the one who wakes up early every morning to cook, wash, and prepare us for school. She is the one who helps us with homework, who sits with us when we are sick. She never neglects us. She never leaves us hungry. She loves us always. The courtroom fell silent. Daniel's voice hardened. But my father. He turned, looking directly at Jonathan. He is the one who shouts, who beats my mother when she is tired, who tells her she is useless. He says she is lazy, but she is the one who does everything. Sometimes he comes home angry and throws things. He scares us. He scares my sister. He scares my mother. That is the truth. The audience stirred, whispers rushing like waves. The judge raised his hand for silence, but his gaze lingered on Daniel, measuring the boy's courage. Mr. Mike cleared his throat, standing sharply. Objection, Your Honor. This is emotional manipulation. The child is too young to understand. The judge cut him off. Counsel, sit down. I will hear him out. Jonathan's face flushed red, his jaw clenched. Daniel continued, his voice growing stronger. My mother does not deserve to be called neglectful. She is the best mother anyone could have. If anyone should lose custody, it is my father, because he does not protect us. He only hurts us. A hush fell over the courtroom. Veronica pressed her hand to her lips, tears streaming freely. Then came Daniela. Her small frame trembled as she stepped forward, but when she reached the stand, her eyes blazed with the same fire as her brother's. I want to speak too, she said firmly. The judge nodded gently. Go ahead, child. Daniela's voice shook at first, but grew with every word. My mama is my best friend. When I have nightmares, she is the one who holds me. When I cry, she sings to me. When I am hungry, she feeds me. My father, he says she is lazy, but he is lying. We all know he is lying. Her gaze snapped to Jonathan, her small hands curling into fists. He shouts at her. He calls her names. He makes her cry. Sometimes I hide under the bed and pray that he will stop, but he doesn't, and when Mama cries, my heart breaks. Her voice cracked, and the courtroom filled with muffled sobs from onlookers. Even the judge's expression softened, though he quickly masked it with sternness. Daniela's final words pierced the silence. Your Honor, please don't let him take us. Please. We want to stay with Mama. She is our home. The silence that followed was deafening. Not even Jonathan's arrogance could fill it. He shifted in his seat, eyes darting nervously as the weight of his children's words settled like iron chains around him. The judge leaned back, exhaling deeply. His pen scratched against his notepad, but his eyes never left Jonathan, who now looked smaller than he ever had. Veronica wept quietly, her heart swelling with pride and grief all at once. She reached for her children as they returned to her side, and together they clung to each other like roots bound deep in the earth. Jonathan's mask was cracking. For the first time, his smirk was gone, and the tide of the case had shifted. The courtroom was heavy with silence. The twins had returned to their mother's side, clutching her hands tightly. Veronica kissed the tops of their heads, her tears falling onto their hair. She no longer cared that everyone was watching. These were not tears of shame anymore. They were tears of release, of pride, of hope. Judge Okwudili leaned forward, his face grave. He tapped his pen once against the wooden bench, the sound echoing like a heartbeat through the still chamber. Mr. Jonathan, he began, his voice sharp as a blade, this court has listened to your claims. You portrayed yourself as a devoted husband and father, but the testimony of your children tells another story, one that cannot be ignored. Jonathan shifted in his seat, tugging at his tie. Mr. Mike tried to rise, but the judge silenced him with a glance. These children, the judge continued, his voice rising, have spoken with more courage, truth, and clarity than many adults who stand in this very courtroom. They have painted a picture of a mother who, despite her suffering, has loved, protected, and nurtured them. And they have revealed a father who has failed in his most basic duty, to protect and cherish his family. Gasps and murmurs spread across the courtroom, but the judge pressed on. Therefore, this court finds Veronica to be a fit and loving mother. Custody of the children is awarded fully to her. Veronica's hands flew to her mouth. Daniel and Daniela squeezed her tighter, their faces breaking into tears and smiles all at once. But the judge was not finished. His stern gaze locked on Jonathan, who was now sweating visibly. As for you, Jonathan, Judge Okwudili's voice thundered, this court does not tolerate men who raise their hands or voices to destroy the dignity of their wives. Let this be clear. If you ever again raise your hand, your voice, or any form of maltreatment toward Veronica, you will face immediate arrest and prosecution under the law. Do you understand me? Jonathan swallowed hard, his smirk long gone. Yes, my lord, he muttered, his voice cracking. The judge leaned forward, his tone final. Let today be the last day you attempt to use intimidation or cruelty as power in your home. This court will be watching. You have been warned. Jonathan sank into his chair, his arrogance stripped away before the eyes of the public. Whispers filled the room, some in disbelief, others in approval. His downfall was complete. The gavel struck once. Case closed. Veronica rose slowly, her hands trembling as she pulled her children into her arms. Daniel buried his face against her shoulder. Daniela whispered through her tears, We did it, Mama. We told the truth. Veronica held them close, her heart swelling. No, my angels. You saved me. You saved us. As they walked out of the courtroom together, hand in hand, the weight of years of silence lifted. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing them in warm light. For the first time in years, Veronica smiled fully, a smile that reached her tired eyes. They were free. They were safe. They were home. Jonathan remained behind in the courtroom, his once confident figure slouched and broken. He had lost not just a case, but the respect of his children, the community, and even himself. And for Veronica, the verdict was not just a legal victory. It was the beginning of a new life, where love and truth had the final word. And that was the story of Veronica and her twins, Daniel and Daniela, who found the courage to speak the truth and defend their mother against years of pain. In the end, love and justice won. What do you think about this story? Do you believe the judge made the right decision? Should Jonathan have faced even stricter punishment? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel for more powerful and emotional stories like this one. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to bring you even more inspiring stories that will touch your heart. Until next time, stay strong, stay hopeful, and remember, love always wins.